Hello and welcome everybody to another episode of Books and Bytes. Today we're taking a deep dive into Adam Ferguson's An Essay on the History of Civil Society.
Ah, a classic.
It really is. It's considered, foundational to social theory.
Absolutely.
Published way back in 1767.
Wow.
Explores how societies evolve from simple structures to, more complex civilizations.
A real journey through time.
It is. And looking at how human nature and government and the whole pursuit of happiness all kind of interplay.
You know, one thing that really strikes me about Ferguson is how he tackles these really tough questions.
Yeah.
Questions we're still grappling with today.
Right.
Like, does progress always lead to a better society?
Uh-huh.
Or are there downsides to all these advancements?
Yeah. He's really pushing us to think critically about what makes a society truly successful. So before we get into the details, can you give us a quick overview of the book's main themes?
Sure.
What's the big picture here?
Well, Ferguson dives deep into the relationship between individual liberty and social order, and how those two forces can sometimes clash.
Interesting.
He also explores the impact of commerce and industry on a nation's character and virtue, arguing that progress can bring both prosperity and decay.
Oh, the double-edged sword.
Exactly. And finally, he tackles this concept of national felicity.
National felicity.
It's this idea of what makes a society truly happy and flourishing.
Okay, so we've got individual freedom versus social order, the double-edged sword of progress, and the pursuit of true happiness. Some pretty big topics. Let's start at the beginning. How does Ferguson define human nature?
Well, you know, at the time, a lot of thinkers were debating this idea of the state of nature.
Right.
Ferguson actually challenges this romantic notion of the noble savage,
Oh, interesting.
living in perfect harmony with nature.
Mm-hmm.
He argues that humans are inherently social creatures,
Right.
even in what he calls the rude stages of development.
Rude.
Yeah, he uses that term rude.
Instead of primitive or something like that.
Yeah, and he points to evidence of social behaviors, even in the most basic societies.
So, like indigenous tribes who might be considered primitive by some.
Exactly. They still form communities, they create systems of governance, they even engage in conflict.
Right.
All of these things point to that desire for connection and social order as fundamental parts of human nature.
It's interesting that he uses the term rude rather than primitive, though. It suggests that he sees these societies as simply less developed, not inherently inferior.
Yeah, that's a good point. Ferguson actually views societal evolution as a spectrum, with no single state of nature as a starting point.
So it's more about how these societies function and adapt to their circumstances, rather than judging them based on some arbitrary standard of civilization.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And for Ferguson, the forces that drive this journey of societal development are actually quite complex.
Okay, let's dig into that. What are these forces that shape how societies grow and change, according to Ferguson?
Well, Ferguson identifies two key sets of principles that he says guide human interaction: union and dissension.
Union and dissension.
So on the one hand, we're driven by things like affection, kindness, and a desire for connection. These are the forces that draw people together to form families, communities, and eventually entire nations.
Okay, it's like the glue that holds society together.
Exactly.
That sense of belonging and shared purpose.
But then you have this other side, the principles of dissension, which include things like animosity, self-interest, and the desire for power.
So it's not all sunshine and roses.
Right.
We're also driven by competition and the pursuit of our own individual goals.
Exactly. And Ferguson argues that both forces are essential for the development of civil society. While affection and cooperation lay the foundation for social bonds, it's the pursuit of individual interests, even if it leads to competition, that drives innovation, specialization, and the development of things like arts and commerce.
So in a way, this tension between unity and dissension is actually a good thing.
Yeah.
It's what keeps society dynamic and prevents stagnation.
That's a great insight. Ferguson sees this interplay as crucial to understanding how societies evolve. It's not a linear progression from bad to good, but a complex dance between these different forces.
That makes a lot of sense. So we've got these fundamental human drives that are shaping how societies take form. But what about happiness? Where does that fit into Ferguson's view of civil society?
Well, this is where Ferguson's idea of national felicity comes in. He's not just talking about individual happiness.
Okay.
He's arguing that true societal well-being involves more than just material wealth or personal pleasure.
Right. So it's not a me-first kind of happiness. It's more about a shared sense of well-being, a feeling that the society as a whole is flourishing.
Exactly. Ferguson emphasizes that achieving this national felicity actually requires citizens to cultivate certain social dispositions.
Social disposition.
Yeah. These aren't necessarily innate qualities,
Okay.
but rather virtues that individuals need to develop through education, social interaction, and participation in public life.
So it's almost like he's saying that being a good citizen isn't just about obeying the law.
Right.
It's about actively contributing to the well-being of the community.
Yes, and Ferguson believes that this active participation is essential for both individual and collective happiness.
Interesting.
He argues that when people focus solely on their own private interests, they become isolated and society as a whole suffers.
Right.
But when they engage with others, contribute to the common good, and cultivate a sense of shared purpose, that's when true national felicity can be achieved.
It's a pretty powerful idea, especially in today's world where individualism is often celebrated above all else. He's suggesting that true fulfillment comes from being part of something larger than ourselves.
Precisely. And this brings us to another key theme: the role of government in balancing individual liberty with the needs of the collective. Ferguson dives deep into the different forms of government, the democracy, aristocracy, monarchy, and examines how each one attempts to strike that delicate balance.
So we've got this idea of national felicity as a goal.
Yes.
And now we're looking at the mechanisms, the systems of government that are supposed to help us get there.
And Ferguson doesn't shy away from the complexities. He doesn't believe that any one form of government is inherently superior to the others. He argues that each has its own strengths and weaknesses. And the success of any political system really depends on a variety of factors.
Like what?
Well, things like the character of the people,
the
prevailing social norms,
and the ability of leaders to balance the interests of the rulers and the ruled.
So it's not just about having the right laws or the perfect constitution. It's also about the people who are in charge and the values they uphold.
Exactly. And Ferguson is particularly concerned about the potential for any form of government to become corrupt and oppressive.
Oh, yeah.
If it doesn't maintain that healthy balance between power and accountability.
Makes sense.
He famously writes, every step and every movement of the multitude, even in what are termed enlightened ages, are made with equal blindness to the future, and nations stumble upon establishments which are indeed the result of human action, but not the execution of any human design.
Wow, that's a powerful statement. He's basically saying that even in societies that consider themselves advanced, there's a danger of blindly stumbling into systems that don't serve the common good.
That's exactly right. And this awareness of the potential pitfalls of government, regardless of its form, is a recurring theme throughout his work. Okay, so we've got human nature, social dynamics, national felicity, and the role of government. What else is Ferguson exploring in this journey through the history of civil society? What other big themes are we going to encounter as we delve deeper into his work?
Well, one of the most significant themes is the impact of commerce and industry on a nation's character. Ferguson's writing at a time when the Industrial Revolution is just beginning to transform society. And he sees both the immense benefits and the potential downsides of this rapid economic and technological development.
So he's grappling with this idea of progress, this question of whether advancements always lead to a better society or if there are hidden costs.
Yes, and this is where Ferguson's analysis becomes particularly relevant for us today.
I can see that.
He's asking questions that we're still struggling with in our own time. What are the trade-offs of economic growth? Does the pursuit of wealth erode virtue?
Good question.
Can material prosperity actually make us weaker in a moral or civic sense? These are all themes that he explores in depth.
Wow. I'm already starting to see the connections to our own society. It sounds like Ferguson's work is more than just a historical artifact. It's a blueprint for understanding the enduring challenges
Yes.
of social and political life.
That's precisely what makes his work so compelling.
Yeah.
He's not just describing the past.
Right.
He's offering insights into the human condition that are timeless and universally applicable.
Okay. I'm hooked. I'm ready to dive deeper into these big questions about progress, virtue, and the potential pitfalls of modern society. But before we do, I need a moment to process all of this. We've covered a lot of ground already.
It's a lot to take in.
Yeah.
But I think you'll find that the more you delve into Ferguson's work, the more relevant and insightful it becomes.
Okay.
He truly was a visionary thinker, and his ideas have a lot to teach us about the challenges we face today.
Well, I'm ready to learn. Let's unpack this idea of progress and its potential downsides. Where does Ferguson take us next on this journey?
Well, let's delve into those complexities of progress as Ferguson saw them. He wasn't against advancement,
No.
but he recognized that what seems like progress
Yeah.
can have some unintended consequences.
Right. Every invention or discovery has the potential to be used for good or bad.
Exactly.
That's how we wield that power.
Precisely. Ferguson actually uses the example of the transition from hunter-gatherer societies to more settled agricultural societies.
Okay.
This is a huge step forward in terms of food production and stability.
Sure.
But it also led to concepts like private property, the accumulation of wealth,
Right.
which in turn created social hierarchies and inequality.
So progress isn't always this neat and tidy upward trajectory.
Right.
It's messy, and it often creates new problems even as it solves old ones.
That's a great way to summarize Ferguson's perspective. He was very aware of these trade-offs. He saw how the development of commerce and industry, while generating wealth and efficiency, could also lead to certain moral and social challenges.
Can you give some specific examples of these challenges? What were some of the downsides of progress that worried him?
Well, one of his main concerns was the potential for commerce to erode virtue.
Okay.
He worried that as societies become more focused on material gain, they might lose sight of those qualities that are essential for a truly flourishing society.
Things like civic duty, compassion, commitment to the common good.
Yes, he's not just talking about economic inequality, but a kind of spiritual or moral poverty that can accompany material wealth if we're not careful.
He was particularly concerned about the corrupting influence of luxury, I imagine.
Yes, exactly. He argued that as people become accustomed to a life of ease and abundance, they can become soft, self-indulgent, less willing to make sacrifices for the greater good.
It's like that old saying, hard times create strong men. Strong men create good times. Good times create weak men, and weak men create hard times.
I love that analogy. And Ferguson was writing long before that saying became popular.
Wow.
He was really ahead of his time in recognizing these cyclical patterns in history.
Yeah.
He saw how societies could become complacent and decadent during times of peace and prosperity, ultimately making them vulnerable to decline or even collapse.
That's a sobering thought. It makes you wonder if some of the challenges we face today, things like political polarization, social unrest, the erosion of trust in institutions, might be symptoms of this kind of societal complacency.
That's a really astute observation.
Thanks.
And Ferguson would likely agree with you. He believed that maintaining a healthy and vibrant society requires constant vigilance and a commitment to certain core values. He wasn't just an observer of history. He was a moral philosopher who believed that individuals have a responsibility to shape their own destinies and the fate of their nations.
So it's not enough to just sit back and enjoy the fruits of progress. We have to be active participants, engaged citizens who are willing to challenge the status quo and fight for what we believe in.
That's the essence of Ferguson's message. He believed that the spirit of liberty, the will to defend one's rights and the rights of others, is something that needs to be constantly nurtured and protected. He saw how easily it could be eroded by things like complacency, dependence on the state, and the gradual concentration of power.
It sounds like he's warning against this kind of slow creep towards authoritarianism.
Yeah.
Even in societies that have a long tradition of freedom and individual rights.
Exactly. He argues that even with laws in place, the spirit of liberty can be undermined if people become passive, apathetic, or too willing to surrender their freedoms in exchange for security or comfort. He uses a rather stark phrase, a nation of helots.
A nation of helots.
Yeah, to describe a society where people become servile and mercenary.
Wow.
Even if they're not living under overt tyranny.
A nation of helots. That's a chilling image.
Yeah.
It suggests that we can lose our freedom without even realizing it, bit by bit, until we're left with nothing but the illusion of choice.
And that's the danger that Ferguson is highlighting. He's arguing that true freedom requires more than just laws on paper.
Yeah.
It requires active citizenship,
Okay.
a willingness to stand up for what's right, and a deep commitment to those values that make a society truly free and flourishing.
Okay, so we've got this potential for progress to erode virtue.
Right.
This concern about luxury and complacency.
Yeah.
And this warning against the slow death of liberty. Where does Ferguson go from here? Does he offer any solutions?
He does.
Yeah.
Any guidance on how to navigate these complex challenges, and this is where his analysis becomes really powerful and relevant for us today. He argues that one of the most important ways to counter these negative trends is through education.
Education.
He believed that education wasn't just about acquiring knowledge or skills, but about forming character, cultivating virtue, and instilling a love of liberty.
So he's talking about a kind of education that goes beyond just preparing people for the workforce.
Right.
He's talking about forming good citizens, people who are equipped to think critically, engage in public life, and contribute to the well-being of their communities.
Precisely. He believed that education should foster a sense of public spirit, a willingness to place the common good above narrow self-interest.
Okay.
He saw education as a powerful tool for shaping the values and beliefs that underpin a healthy and vibrant society.
That's a really inspiring vision. It suggests that we all have a role to play in shaping the future.
Yes.
Not just through our individual actions,
Right.
but through our commitment to educating and inspiring the next generation.
Absolutely. And this brings us to another crucial element in Ferguson's framework for a flourishing society, the importance of social institutions.
Social institutions.
Yeah, he believed that strong families, communities, and civic organizations are essential for cultivating virtue, fostering a sense of belonging, and providing a counterbalance to the potentially isolating forces of modern life.
So it's not just about individual effort.
Right.
It's about creating the kind of social structures that support and nurture the development of good citizens.
Ferguson saw these institutions as playing a vital role in transmitting values, fostering social cohesion, and providing opportunities for individuals to connect with something larger than themselves.
Okay.
He believed that a healthy society needs a balance between individual liberty and social responsibility, and that these institutions are crucial for maintaining that balance.
It's a fascinating perspective, especially given the current debates about the role of government, the decline of community, and the rise of individualism. It seems like Ferguson was grappling with issues that are still very much alive today.
That's what makes his work so enduring. He wasn't just commenting on the events of his time.
No.
He was identifying fundamental patterns in human behavior and social dynamics that are relevant across cultures and throughout history. His insights into the complexities of progress, the dangers of complacency, and the enduring importance of virtue and public spirit are as relevant today as they were in the 18th century.
Okay, I'm really starting to appreciate the depth and relevance of Ferguson's work.
Good.
But I'm also sensing that there's more to come.
There is.
He's laid out these challenges, these potential pitfalls of modern society.
Yes.
But does he offer any hope?
Oh, he does.
Okay.
Does he believe that we can overcome these obstacles?
Yeah.
And build a truly flourishing society?
Yeah.
He does offer hope.
And that hope is rooted in his belief in human agency.
Okay.
The power of individuals to shape their own destinies
Right.
and the fate of their nations.
Okay.
He argues that decline is not inevitable.
Okay.
He believes that if we understand the dangers,
Right.
learn from the mistakes of the past,
Yeah.
and actively cultivate those virtues that are essential for a free and flourishing society, we can chart a course
Got it.
towards a better future.
So it's not just about diagnosing the problem.
No.
It's about finding solutions.
Yes.
About taking action. About believing that we can make a difference.
That's the spirit of Ferguson's work. He's not just a theorist.
Right.
He's a call to action.
Okay.
He's urging us to be vigilant, to be engaged, to be the kind of citizens who are willing to fight for the ideals of liberty, virtue, and the common good.
That's a powerful message, and one that I think we all need to hear.
In these complex and challenging times.
Yeah.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground here. We've explored the complexities of progress,
Right.
the dangers of complacency, the importance of education and social institutions,
Yes.
and the enduring need for virtue and public spirit. But I'm sensing that there's still more to uncover, more insights to glean from Ferguson's work.
You're right. There's so much richness and depth in his writing, and I think the more we delve into his specific observations about the decline of nations, the more we'll understand the subtle ways in which societies can lose their way and the steps we can take to prevent that from happening.
I'm ready to hear more. Let's dig into those specific warning signs that Ferguson identifies. What should we be on the lookout for, both in our own lives and in the larger society? So let's get into those warning signs. What are some of the specific red flags that Ferguson points to when a society might be heading towards decline?
Well, one of the most striking concepts he introduces is this idea of national waste.
National waste.
Yeah. And he's not just talking about like frivolous government spending or reckless military adventures.
Okay.
He's talking about a broader squandering of resources, both material and human.
So it's not just about, money down the drain. It's about a society kind of losing its focus.
Exactly.
Losing its drive. Losing its sense of purpose.
He talks about how a nation can become so obsessed with consumption, luxury, the pursuit of individual pleasure, that it forgets how to create, how to build, how to invest in the things that really matter for the long-term well-being of the community.
Right. It makes me think of those ancient civilizations that, seemed invincible at one point, but then crumbled from within because they became too complacent, too focused on their own comforts and distractions.
That's a great connection. Ferguson was fascinated by those historical examples, and he saw clear parallels in the trends of his own time. He worried that the pursuit of wealth and luxury could lead to this kind of softening of character, a decline in civic virtue, and ultimately a weakening of the very foundations of a free society.
So it's not just about external threats or economic downturns.
Right.
It's about a kind of internal rot, a loss of those qualities that make a society strong and resilient.
Precisely. And he points to several specific manifestations of this national waste.
Oh, like what?
Well, one is the decline of public spirit,
Okay.
that sense of shared responsibility for the common good.
Right.
He noticed that as societies become more complex and specialized, individuals could become more isolated, more focused on their own narrow interests, and less invested in the well-being of the community as a whole.
Yeah, it's almost like everyone retreats into their own little silos, and the idea of a collective good gets lost in the shuffle.
Exactly. And Ferguson believed that this erosion of public spirit was incredibly dangerous.
Yeah.
He famously wrote, "The individual is nothing and the public everything,"
Wow.
emphasizing that, a society can only thrive when its members are actively engaged in public life and willing to put the needs of the community above their own private interests.
That's a powerful statement. It really challenges this idea of rugged individualism that's often celebrated, in our culture.
Yeah.
He's saying that we're all interconnected and our individual well-being is ultimately tied to the health of the society we live in.
Yes, that's a key insight. And he believed that this decline in public spirit often goes hand in hand with the concentration of power.
Okay.
As people become less engaged in civic life, less willing to hold their leaders accountable, it creates a vacuum that's easily filled by, a more powerful state. And even if that state isn't overtly tyrannical, it can still gradually erode individual liberties in the name of efficiency or security or the supposed good of the people.
So it's like this subtle shift towards authoritarianism, not through force or violence, but through apathy and a gradual surrendering of individual responsibility.
That's precisely the danger that Ferguson was warning against. He saw how easily freedom could be lost, not just through conquest or revolution, but through a kind of slow, insidious process of decay from within.
It's a sobering thought, but also incredibly relevant to our own time.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder if some of the political and social trends we're seeing today might be symptoms of this kind of societal decline that Ferguson was so worried about.
It's a question worth pondering for sure, and I think Ferguson would urge us to be vigilant, to be aware of these historical patterns, and to actively resist those forces that could undermine the foundations of, free and flourishing society.
So what can we do if we see these warning signs, this national waste, the erosion of public spirit, the concentration of power? What steps can we take to counter these trends and build a more, a more resilient, more virtuous society?
Well, Ferguson offers several suggestions, and I think they're as relevant today as they were in his time. First and foremost, he emphasizes the importance of education.
Education?
But not just any kind of education. He believed that education should be about more than just acquiring knowledge or skills.
Right.
It should be about forming character,
Okay.
cultivating virtue, and instilling a love of liberty.
Yeah, it sounds like he's talking about a kind of holistic education that prepares young people not just for the workforce, but for active citizenship,
Yes.
for a life of meaning and purpose.
Exactly. He saw education as a powerful tool for shaping the values and beliefs that underpin a healthy society. He believed that education should foster a sense of public spirit, a willingness to place the common good above narrow self-interest, and a deep commitment to those principles that make a society truly free and flourishing.
It's a pretty inspiring vision, but also a challenging one.
It is.
It suggests that we need to rethink our approach to education, to move beyond just teaching facts and figures, and focus on cultivating the kinds of citizens who will, build a better future.
Absolutely. And Ferguson also emphasizes the importance of strong social institutions, families, communities, civic organizations as essential pillars of a healthy society. He saw these institutions as playing a vital role in transmitting values, fostering social cohesion, and providing opportunities for individuals to connect with something larger than themselves.
So it's not just about individual effort. It's about creating the kind of social structures that support and nurture the development of, good citizens. It's about recognizing that we're all interconnected and our individual well-being is ultimately tied to the health of the community.
That's a great way to summarize Ferguson's message, and I think it's a message that's worth reflecting on, especially in a world that often celebrates individualism above all else. Ferguson reminds us that true freedom, true happiness, true flourishing is something we achieve together, not in isolation.
It's a powerful reminder and a challenging one.
Yes.
It suggests that we all have a responsibility not just to ourselves, but to each other, to our communities, and to the generations that will come after us.
That's the essence of Ferguson's legacy. He wasn't just an observer of history. He was a moral philosopher who believed in the power of human agency to shape the future. He challenged us to be active, engaged citizens, to cultivate virtue, to resist complacency, and to never take our freedom for granted.
Well, it's been a fascinating deep dive into Ferguson's work. It's made me think differently about progress, about the challenges we face, and about our own role in shaping a better future.
It's been a pleasure exploring these ideas with you, and I hope that Ferguson's insights will continue to spark conversation, inspire action, and guide us as we navigate the complexities of our own time.
Well said. Thanks for joining me on this journey. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep striving to make the world a better place.